Test. All right, I'm here. Trying to get the stream going, and I had nothing but technical difficulties, of course. But it was a new one this time. I think there might be lemurs involved. So I'm doing this live, and I've turned off the live chat, and there won't be a comment section because I don't really care. And at the same time, every time a person says, I don't really care, what they really mean is, I care too much for it to be trivialized. And so, you know, this is not to say I don't care what people think. Of course, I do care. I just don't think it's the place to talk about it. It's not the place, it's not the way to deal with it. But we've done a lot of stuff live on this channel. And part of doing stuff live, I think, is like this fantasy of authenticity and immediacy. You get to actually hear what a person has to say without any edits. The idea of the agora was supposed to be taking that idea further in a sort of way, but removing the ease of access or the friction-free component, mostly for myself or anyone else involved, so that we stop talking to screens and cameras and do it out in the open, like for real. But some people really don't like that shit, man. And so when I was originally going to do this video, I was going to call it agoraphobia, because there's been a complete breakdown of communication between me and Mikey and Nance. And it'd be really easy for me to blame what started it all, which happened with me trying to organize an agora at Otterbein University. I just thought, oh, well, why don't we just do it here? Like, this would be awesome. People could stop by and say hi after the conference. It wasn't supposed to be a part of the LAT conference. It was supposed to be us doing our thing. And let's just say Todd was really put off by the idea that I reached out to the events people, the department at the university, and just asked them if it would be okay. And I guess the idea that I just wasn't focused on what was going on there, but was also thinking about trying to do the agora, was an insult, or it came across as he said, a violation of their radical egalitarian ethos. But I didn't know he was mad until it was too late, because someone emailed someone else and there was communication that I was not a part of, and then we went into the bar and then he was mad at me, and I thought he was pulling my leg or flipping me some shit or something. I didn't really understand until it was the middle of the conversation. I realized, oh, he's for real actually mad. And so we were all put out by it. And I thought that was the end of it, though. Like, that night we talked about it, and then I thought that was more or less the end of it. So, like, this is supposedly, like, what caused it, right? And I think there's something autistic about me, or obsessive maybe, that just wants to focus on how hypocritical or unjust it was, or how it could have gone down different or something like that. But at the point that something like that can cause a breakdown, there was already a problem, right? Like G.K. Chesterton said in that book, I think it's called The Eternal Man. He says, to say that World War One was caused by like someone assassinating the archbishop is like or the archduke, sorry, that's the kind of oversimplification people will go for when they're thinking about history or when they're weaving a narrative. And I could be like, no, man, it's all Mikey. Mikey's just mad because he really likes Todd, and I put him in a weird situation, and I didn't even realize it. But that ain't, I don't know, man. The communication is just what got fucked. And now Mikey's gone. Mikey has not really communicated with me for a month and a half. Um, for the first month of that, I thought we were just busy. And then I found out he's actually really mad. And then that probably means hurt. That probably means a lot of other things. I'm not going to sit here and speculate about other people's shit when I can't really talk to them one on one, or even one on one with mediation, right? Like, so it's easier maybe just to part ways. At least for Mikey, it's easier. For a for a for as long as anyone has known about Theory Underground, Mikey's been a crucial part of the thing, because part of our get out of wage labor plan was to free me, and then I was going to put everything I had into freeing him. And that was going on for a couple years. It had already been going on when I was doing Theory Plea before Theory Underground. Theory Underground was something Mikey told me. He said, build it and they will come. What's the it I was supposed to build? Well, the idea was like a theory church almost. Instead of a Patreon, instead of a university, like the idea was, yeah, we will have lectures, we'll have seminars, but it's going to be a bit more like a church model, meaning like this is a way of life. People can attend weekly and get their sort of spiritual nourishment in a Marxian sense. When he uses that term in A Strange Labor, right? But when I started it, or before I started it, Mikey was very clear that with this analogy of a theory church, I'm the pastor. He didn't. I was like, you would have to be the pastor. You're going to be doing like weekly sermons. Now this is all like an analogy. It's an analogy we never use publicly because church sounds so culty or religious, and we're not trying to be like that. But at the same time, like 100 people at a Baptist church are able to make it so that a pastor can do it full time, support his wife and family, and other people will also be able to devote serious time towards it. And Mikey wanted to just be like a deacon who has a Bible study. Like he didn't want to have to do the organizational stuff. He didn't want to have to do he wants to show up and just lead the thing, the whatever it is that he's doing with his seminar. And when he said that, I was like, well, you'd still come to the other stuff, right? Like you'd come to sermons, right? And he's like, yeah. But he's been pretty insistent that I do everything, and that at the end of the day, Theory Underground is going to be my thing, and that everyone has said, I'm Dictator Dave. And if that's not going to work, then things will have to change. And we're at this point where that's not going to work. And there's a lot of reasons why that isn't going to work that I need to reflect on. And I don't have time to reflect on because I'm in the middle of a move. You all can't see off camera, but this apartment is completely packed up. This space here is all that remains. The rest of the day, I gotta clean, and then I'm out by the end of the day. And it's hard to talk about any of this without crying or getting angry or sounding resentful or talking about how unfair it is or how I feel about it. Which is why I've put off talking about it. It's why I've put a lot of thought into like maybe just some kind of like an HR style statement like, oh, Mikey's gone now. We're parting ways. It's amicable. We wish him nothing but the best. But the crazy thing about that is like, this is supposed to be an underground operation. It's difficult because people's futures and finances and friendships get mixed up that way. And it's not just friendships. Like, I'm a married man now, looking to start a family. And so it gets more real and complicated all the time. But it's also hard to put out some kind of an HR thing when I feel like the record actually reflects, if it would be allowed to reflect, in a way that I think is worse for other people than myself. That's where it becomes like, well, I'm not trying to do some cancel culture or call out culture shit. Because I've always had a very principled position against all that. But this audience that we've built, that I've fought to filter, to select for a better audience than I think what is normal, how hard I've gone against the tendencies of the algorithm and the medium to try to do something different, it means that we've stayed small. It's a small operation. I do everything. Except this year, the plan was to get a lot more, growth, because time is running out. Time's running out to make the original plan something that's viable for me to really be able to do this and still be able to do the other things that I need to be able to do. So there were like 3 plans. Plan A, by the end of this year, not only is Free Mikey going well, but we have him to a point where he's only working part-time at his warehouse job. And then if the growth projections that I had at the beginning of the year had worked out, then he would have been free from wage labor by March of next year. Like that was the plan. Benjamin Studebaker got involved because he believes in this and he really wanted to see it succeed. And if we can free Mikey, we can prove something here, like it's more than just me. But it's barely been me, right? Like it's not like I've been getting paid a lot or anything. And I've taken everything extra beyond what I need and kept putting it towards the growth or towards paying Mikey. And so we've paid him a lot at this point. So money's involved, friends are involved, family's involved. Things are changing. It's complicated. And I have this question about what do I owe you? What do I owe the audience? What do I owe the people? Who've made it possible? What do I owe you all in terms of an explanation? When I'm clearly not capable of really talking about it. And part of it's been like, I don't fucking owe anyone shit, like that's part of the plan. Like you get what you get or you go to do something else, go somewhere else. Because at the end of the day, I got to do what I got to do to make it work. But that mentality combined with, oh yeah, I do everything and I'm the dictator, like that gets complicated when you're invested in the operation and you care about it. And I'm sick and tired of people giving me advice, whether it be business advice or relationship advice or tone policing. It's a lot. And so it's like I prefer to not open the door for those kinds of conversations. Prefer not to open the door for the whole he said, she said bullshit. And I feel like talking about it live at all does open some kind of a door. But I found out like in the last 12 hours, the door's open. Fucking people are already talking about it. I haven't said anything about it, but I found out people know, people are talking about it. And that there are going to be people who are really broken up about this. And I was hoping that things might change given a little bit more time. But at the end of the day, it is what it is and it sucks. And to say it is what it is almost like an acknowledgement of some ontological state of affairs that we could actually describe in some positivistic sense. And we can't. Not really. Not when it feels like we're under fire. And I am still trying to make sure things will work because at the end of the day, I have been driving a bus full of people who get on and get off and get on and get off and get on and get off. And I've had a sort of rotating I've had a rotation on shotgun here at the front of the bus. It's not just a bus that works, it's a bus that I've had to basically build from scratch because there's a lot more beyond the computer and the channel or whatever. There's a whole other side of things that I'm juggling personalities, I'm juggling positions, I'm weaving theorizing in action while doing practice. Like it's all this shit. It's like I think of the show The Bear and the chef in the kitchen and the fucking insane dynamic there. And it's like the difference between the bear and the bus analogies is that in the show The Bear, the chef is trying to come in and save an operation that's going to shit. He didn't start that restaurant. He's just trying to make sure it can succeed. And in that case, there's already people involved. There's people who think they know what they're doing in the kitchen. And he's got to work with those people's personalities. But with the bus analogy, it's just like, nah, man, don't worry. I'll drive it. I'll organize the route. I'll try to make sure you can get on and get off when you want to. Try to just communicate with me if you want off for a little while. Don't just disappear. Don't talk to me for a month and a half or whatever. And that's not something I'm saying about Mikey. That's something I'm saying about just in general. It's difficult because every time I try to do something with other people, it's great, but then it always becomes more difficult as they have stuff in their lives, with their jobs, with their exhaustion, with their lack of time, energy. And at the end of the day, I'm holding the bag in terms of I'm left holding it, the responsibilities, right? The through line. Going to sleep thinking about how it's going to work, waking up thinking about how it's going to work. And so there's definitely people who've been deeply invested who are like, it's not going to work anymore. It's actually broken now. And maybe I'm in denial. You know, there are many stages of grief. And it seems like I go through all of them every day for the last few weeks. Like we took all the rest of our savings and I gave the rest of my savings to Mikey so he could attend LAC. And instead of doing the Sublime Objective Ideology course that he was going to do to get the money to go to LAC, he was instead going to teach a Baudrillard course live on a podcast that we're going to be doing called Why Maybe. And so after a month of like not communicating and feeling like things might be wrong, I'm over here just like, well, I just got to push on, and I'm sure I'm just imagining things, right? And I was like, thinking, no, this is fine. We're gonna be just fine. And I didn't find out that Mikey was upset about the LAC thing until it was too late. I was trying to do an episode with him because it's been a month. We haven't done anything. Let's do something. The whole plan for this year is we got to do a bunch of shit so that we can get to where we want to be by the end of the year, because plan A is this thing grows to where it's going to work, But I found out, yeah, he doesn't want to do anything. And so I spent the last couple of weeks being real mad at Todd McGowan because I think that it was unfair and unjust and all this other stuff. I feel also betrayed. Like if you got a problem with me, let me know. But there's a deeper issue going on. This is not the Archduke was assassinated and that's what causes World War I. No, it's never the thing. It's never the thing that causes it. The causes that people will point to are like ideological, right? And it's a fetishization of one part of a process that's very obvious. And like I was saying, in my sort of autistic, obsessive way, I'm just thinking, no, but this is like, this ultimately just comes back on Todd. Like, why be mad at me? I didn't blow up the spot by asking permission to do something. But if people, if people feel like they can't communicate with me about something that they are upset about, that's a deeper issue for which I can take a lot of responsibility. And because I don't want to like say it is all on someone else or have to unpack a lot of the details, for now, I'm happy to take the responsibility and just say, yeah, I can be hard to communicate with when I know that I'm right. Impossible to communicate. If I know that I'm right and that the situation is unjust, and if I were to actually like unpack all the details, there's no way, there's just no way anyone is going to have any questions about this, that I am in the right. It's hard to communicate with someone who's so certain about something. And I'm not the kind of person who's usually that certain about things. But when it comes to saying, no, I was not out of line, actually, I was just trying to do something. And I've always just taken initiative and tried to do what I think is good and what will help us succeed. But if I'm impossible to talk to, well, then what does that say about me? Before Nance told me he was leaving, he said that I am 80% right, but the 20% that I'm wrong about is how I deal with it, how I communicate about it. And it's because if I know I'm right and other people won't listen to reason, and I'm saying it's a matter of principle, but I'm not at that point any longer willing to just be like, hey, I get it. We're all upset. Let's just have a come to Jesus moment. Then it's broken. And what we're trying to do is impossible. So Nance is gone too. And it's complicated because there's other things happening. There's other reasons that relationships were stressed beyond the ones I've even indicated so far. But I can definitely own the fact that there's a case to be made that I've been tyrannical in moments where it's like, no, look, I'm driving the bus and I'm fixing the engine and you're just riding along. Just if you don't like it, just get off or just sit back there. Just let me figure it out. So, yeah. Plan B was that Theory Underground won't be a feasible way out for Mikey, and that, he'd at least be able to, make a little extra money doing this. At this point, it was a lot more than a little already. I thought we were pretty on track. But what was different about this year as opposed to the previous years was that I tried to get other people involved. I tried to get other people to take on responsibilities. There were times that people said that they would do things that they didn't do. Typical organizational people kind of problems, right? But before the year kicked off, I had taken on 1,000 pounds because I was saying, look, we're going to go from where we are to where Mikey's free. And we're going to do that in a year to year and 3 months. And so my expectations and my sense of like what's necessary to get it done that made it so that I was able to like take on that load. It was all kind of, here's what's complicated about it and why it really, I think, got fucked, is that I was thinking that this is I don't know how to say this shit, man. It feels like I've been carrying 1,000 pounds that I would have never shouldered if it wasn't for a bunch of other people saying they were going to do things or just kind of keep doing what they were doing. But instead of doing what they were doing themselves. They were focusing on what they needed to do. And so it's hard to say that because, of course, they got to do what they got to do. But at the end of the day, yeah, I've been frustrated about the fact that people keep saying they'll do things and then they don't do those things. They'll say that they'll be somewhere and then they're not there. Or they'll disappear for like a month right before tour. Or they'll we can't even plan things because when you plan stuff and other people are involved, like you do have to talk to them. Even if you're a dictator, you still have to communicate. But there's been like people getting in, getting out, and it's complicated. And I can't sit here and go through my grievances about how, yeah, people at the end of the day, without their time and energy, they're basically able to show up for a thing here or there, usually spontaneously. As soon as you try to start doing stuff on a schedule, they become really hard to do stuff with. You build a schedule, you say, hey, we'll do something weekly. But then, oh, they're traveling, or, oh, something happened, the car broke down, things are very stressful. And so it's just like, in a normal world where I'm trying to do something like this, if it wasn't online, and we're all part of like a community, let's just imagine a real church. It's like you've got people trying to help each other out in that situation, but instead, this stuff's online, man. And everybody knows it's really easy to just like put your phone in a room, walk away, and worry about your life and not worry about the phone or the things, the relationships, the projects involved with the phone. You just put the phone away and just focus on doing what you got to do to keep your head above water. But when that shit happens, I'm still here, still making it work. And so, like, this is not news. The reason that Mikey said, you got to make it all happen, you got to do everything, is because he's seen what I can achieve when I'm actually just left to my devices and I actually just get to do things. And I'm not caught up in too many meetings trying to talk to too many people about what's going on. And so I grossly underestimated the way that things were in October and was making projections based off of how things were then. And then parts of November, parts of December were really good. And it's like, yeah, if we can just kind of keep doing this, like the live streaming was going really, really great, especially once Benjamin started doing stuff with us. It's like, yeah, this is going really well. And so I'm we went through like a serious growth spurt, and then in a short amount of time, a big decline. December was a huge problem. Like I didn't get paid in December. It was bad because of the move from the old website to the new website. But I was like, oh, we'll bounce right back. We'll bounce right back. And sure enough, like over the next couple of months, we were bouncing back, even though I had this person, then this person, then this person. It was like a rotation of people jumping up into shotgun, but then not able to do so reliably. And the unreliability of it all made it so I was doing everything very spontaneously. And I was just like, well, you know what? If I have 4 podcasts going, then there will always be someone I can do stuff with, you know? And so I got 4 podcasts going. And I think the first real moment of crisis was when I scheduled to have all 4 podcasts on one day. We're going to do something with Mikey, with Ann, with Nance, with Benjamin. Be like a long stream where I would do something with each of them. And then the goal was to be able to start doing that regularly, weaving these relationships and building up a sort of wavelength where sometimes we all would talk about the stuff going on, kind of like the Epic Marathon streams, but a lot more working with the people who were the most like certain that they could like, yes, make this a thing, that we're all in on this, right? And so plan A at this point is not happening. But plan B, I thought, oh, well, you know, maybe there's a different version of plan B that could still be great. Plan C was obviously I'm going to keep doing what I do, but it's going to change a lot more. The direction I'm headed in is one where I will be doing a lot of manual labor, but it's the kind that is not alienated. It's the kind where I get to listen to books. It's the kind where I'm actually helping my parents retire. It's the kind where I'm learning skills and supporting my wife, who's going to be learning a lot more of the skills when it comes to the in and outs of running the farm. And we're trying to start a family, bring life into this world, this crazy, insane world, this world that so many people are certain we should not be bringing life into. But I've become convinced that the only real way that I'm going to grow up is having real dependence, not just people who are like dependent on me online, but like people who I can unconditionally love and who I don't get to just like, oh, put my phone on do not disturb and walk away from. People who are children, you know, real children, my own children. Like that's a kind of crazy thing. And so Ann and I trying to get real serious about this. She was struggling with this because she said, Dave, you've taken on way too much. You're too stressed out. I hate what Theory Underground is doing to you. She said this in January after the first couple of crises. And I said, Ann, listen, we're not going to start talking about what plan C might look like at, until the end of the year if we haven't given it our best and most serious shot. She was planning on doing things between February and April that would have had her up at the farm doing this work ahead of time, learning some of the ropes. And I said, look, we can't say we gave it our all and our best shot this year without putting everything on the line and really, really trying to make it work. I think that we should take this seriously, this opportunity with Will Proudler, who's making a documentary about Theory Underground. He's traveling. So this documentary is something I started it in 2023 on that tour. I kept it going in 2024. Someone else came on board to help with that. It wasn't really his cup of tea. He had much greater opportunities and more important tasks. And Will was already working on a screenplay about Theory Underground. And so I was like, do you want to take up the doc? And he got excited about the project and said that he would actually travel to the US and travel across the US. And so, in December, Ann and I had been like, well, we probably shouldn't do a tour in June, But here, Ann and I are having like this serious conversation about how to really like prioritize TU just for one last year, just to see how far can we get it in 1 year if we just really lean in and do everything we can. So we had a hard conversation about what would that look like? What does that mean? And it meant like, no, Will's not gonna just come here and do some interviews with us and then go do interviews with other people. Let's travel with them. Let's actually do the tour that we were thinking we're too busy for with this transition in our lives. Let's just say this transition in our lives is less important than putting everything into TU. And so we did the TU tour and involved, right? She changed her plans. We had to drive up to North Idaho, 6.5 hours, to have a serious conversation with my parents so that they knew that we weren't doing them wrong, pulling out, leaving them high and dry by having Ann go on tour. We're not just off lollygagging and having fun. It was like, Mom and Dad, listen, TU has grown, and it's grown a lot more than we imagined it would have a couple years ago. And we want to see if we really devote ourselves to it and don't treat it part-time, and Ann is also going to really help, what can really, really come of it, And, my mom doesn't understand what Theory Underground is. She tried to get me to explain it to her in 30 seconds, and she said it was too intellectual for her to care. And Ann, sitting there, it's a funny situation. Like my mom saying, it's too intellectual for me to care. And I said, Mom, you don't have to care about the intellectual side of it. Just know it's like, there's money. It's actually working. I don't have to work at Amazon right now because I'm at least able to make enough for that. And I'm actually able to pay some other people to help. I'm even able to help. I couldn't replace Ann's income, but I was able to pay her enough that she was able to have a change in her life where she could actually focus on the administrative stuff and the accounting for real. My mom was like, okay, that speaks volumes. So they're trying to make a farm work, and they're only able to bring in really barely anything after the year is over, but it's enough for them to live for now. It's not much of a retirement, but they've put so much work into what they're doing. They have an amazing operation. It's the culmination of my mom's intellectual and practical life. She's been learning every day for the last 30 years how to be a pioneer, how to homestead, how to do a market garden, how to do polyfacing, how to do all of this other stuff. And my dad's culmination of all of his inventing. He's an inventor, he's a doer, he can make anything happen. My mom says, I need this, he makes it happen. And so they're both really, they're iconic, but I think they didn't really understand. And so Ann was trying to explain it to them and was like, look, you just need to know that Dave's like doing something that a lot of people really believe in. And if we don't give it our best shot, the opportunity cost is insane, but also like it's an actual additional source of income. Like she's explaining it to my mom in terms of she'll understand. She's like, it sounds like you're just selling people nothing and they're giving you money for it. And of course, from her standpoint, theory's just nothing. So of course it seems that way. And Anne was like, no, like this is really helping people get a new perspective on things. It gives them something exciting to wake up to. It's something they can listen to at work. But it gets them thinking seriously and deeply about what the good life is. So my parents actually supported this, this change in plans and Anne going on tour. And Anne gave it her all. She never complained once. She was never late to anything. She was always there. She was super communicative when she needed to be. She also, if she realized that something that she was upset about was going to get in the way, she'd put it off till later, bring it up at the right time. And, it definitely brought us closer together. But, there were moments on tour where she just was like, why? Why are we going so far out of our way and bending over backwards to make this work when we're being taken for granted, when we're being treated in such a egregious way? And it's true, man. A lot of places on tour, people treat her like she's a nobody. No respect for her. I've never met someone who has a wife and then I just treat their wife like they don't exist, The the other half of a person is like the most important half of that person. And if that other half of that person isn't on board, man, it ain't fucking happening. At least not plan A. Maybe not plan B. But plan C is the one that now I can't talk about. Not really. Because I thought it would be a pretty smooth transition into this soul, soil, cycle era of TU, where it becomes a lot less about workers with earbuds just having something to be excited to listen to that helps them bury deeper into the niches of the post-class fractured mass and instead gets us all out to touch grass and do stuff with other people in a way that turns the tools of theory, critical theory, back on these tendencies that cause us to become hyper niche consumers. To me, it was easy to see how Mikey fits into that plan because if he just wants to treat it like he's leading a Bible study, we already know what the Bible study would be. It's not a Bible. I mean, we did talk about that. He actually wanted to do a someday, like an actual, like him walk people through the King James version of the Bible and like him explain what he understood to be what that book is saying and why he doesn't respect it, right? But the real thing he was going to lead is what he already did with his intro to Zizek and intro to land courses, which is the fault line theory. And how that fits into the soul, soil, cycle, nature, nurture, natality, T3 institution kind of transition. It's like, yeah, well, people need to have a crash course in the fault line theory to understand where the theory scene is at, so that we can know what to do, or how to develop in a way that works with the most popular and radical kind of takes on the situation. And people love it. I love it. Everyone loves it. He wasn't teaching those courses this year. He was just doing seminars once a month, leading a thing where he talks about whatever he's working on. And he's done some really cool shit in that amount of time. So for me, it wasn't hard to imagine how he fits in. But I think whatever happened at LAC probably made him realize he can't communicate with me about the things that he's upset about with me when I think that I'm right. And I definitely felt right. And like the record will reflect positively on my role in the whole thing, because all I'm trying to do is what I always do, which is just organize. But that's a fetishization. That's the archduke phenomenon that I'm referring to, where you take the thing and you make it the thing, when in reality there's so much more stuff going on. And like I'm saying, the part that I can take responsibility for is that I've become, in the minds of a lot of people, impossible to talk about or call out or talk to about those things that are genuinely problems. It's like, what I don't like is like petty, nitpicky bullshit. But at the same time, it's like I have tried to surround myself with people who will be clear in their communication with me when they think that there's a problem, especially when we're talking about my closest collaborators. And if something about me or the way that I've been over time has made it so that people think that that's not actually something they can do, because when they imagine, well, if I said this, then Dave would react this way, and then Dave would spiral, or I would spiral, or we'd spiral off of each other, and it's not going to go anywhere, and nothing's going to happen, it's not worth bringing up. Obviously, like, the dam builds up. And so that's how I'm going to try to take responsibility here, is to say, my operating assumptions have been wrong about how I can or should be in order to drive the bus while trying to build it, while trying to fix it, while trying to work with other people in the capacities that they're able. And so that's all correct. What I don't want to see is the peanut gallery. That's why I turned off the live chat for this thing. And it sucks to say that, because a lot of the most thoughtful and invested people here, obviously you're not part of the peanut gallery, but there's a big sort of, I don't know. I was talking to students about this yesterday. It's like they're talking about how their online behavior, and on the one, like, I'm like, well, why don't you guys comment on things? Because they were saying they always read the comments under every video that they watch, every TikTok that they really enjoy. They always look at the comments. And then they were talking about how they never comment though. And I was like, well, why don't you comment? And they were like, oh, well, the people who comment, they are attention seekers. But then others, one of the other students starts talking about, well, actually, it's like you either put too much thought into what you're going to say, and then there's the worry that it takes a lot of time, and then it blows up in your face anyway because people will misunderstand you. Or you just say whatever comes to mind, and the chances are that causes problems. And I was like, so it's attention seekers versus scaredy cats. And I was like, do you think that that's fair? And they were talking about the ways that it's fair, and I was like, yeah, but But also, like, you're not just scared though, you're also like aware that this is not the place for it, or that it's not going to work out the way you want, right? And I was like, with the attention seekers, like, they might also like just genuinely care. It might not be attention seeking. It might actually be that they care. But then there's also, and this is the other part that comes in, is like you got like bully trolls who are just like obviously there to kind of pick at you and or pick at the other people and cause problems. And on the other side of the bully trolls, you got the concern trolls, the people who are like really worried about things, really, really worried, performing worriedness. Oh, I can't believe you said that. Oh, I'm so disappointed that you said that. But the thing is, and what tears me up the most about it is that there's a lot of people, they could be perceived as this, and they could be perceived as that, or they could be perceived as this, or they could be perceived as that. But in reality, what we have, I think, built is a lot of people whose hearts and minds are in this. And they're really trying to follow the threads, and they're trying to change their lives, and they're trying to do what they got to do, and they love this. And we're all trying to fucking work in an ecosystem that its tendencies turn us into these lower things, or it makes other people think that we're these lower things. But in reality, it's like, nah, you just care. You just actually care. And in the case of the person who comes across like a bully troll, they actually think that something needs to be said. Something needs to be said. Someone needs to hear this. That's possible sometimes. Same with the concern trolls. But it's a hostile environment, and that's why a lot of people don't step out into it and say anything. And then there's other people who are able to kind of just be indifferent and just engage, and they're not attention seeking, but they're probably attention deprived. Well, on tour, I've definitely found out we've got some real cool people who are here for it. Even at the LAC conference, there were people who seemed really cool. Platypus, there were people who seemed really cool. There were also just other people who've been involved for a long time who came out for things, who are definitely like mature, and they weren't acting in some parasocial way. They weren't making it weird. And they're just genuinely like, this is cool. And, they feel a lot more like fellow travelers, colleagues, a good neighbor. One of the big things that I've struggled with about like how to say something that's not just a HR statement or whatever, but like is as real as I can be with people without being resentful or arrogant or prideful or hurt or uh, angry or makes other people depressed and causes them to spiral. Is that beyond like the worst tendencies or dynamics of this medium and the kind of space, the singular kind of space we've been able to cultivate, there's like some people like really involved who are going to be really torn up about this. And I got to think about like, well, what do I owe them? And there were people who are like, you don't owe them anything, Dave. You just got to do what you got to do. And I've had a small team of very different people giving me advice who are involved or who aren't involved. I've talked to Benjamin, I've talked to Daniel, I've talked to Anne. And I've talked to two people who've been involved with the seminars and who love everybody and who also came out on tour. And the reason I talk to the reason I say that is because, I'm not going to talk to someone who I haven't met, who we haven't been in the meat space with. And I'm also not going to talk to somebody who's only been following my seminar, you know? Like as far as like what to say, how to say it, I only wanted to talk to people who, yeah, they're not gonna be pleased. They're gonna be sad. They're gonna be, but they're not gonna be like just like, oh yeah, well Dave, it's all you. I wanted to try to surround myself with people who are fair, who are measured, um, who might even have some wisdom to offer. And it's with these kinds of things, it's always like, oh well, you shouldn't say anything, or you should say something, but you should just say it from the heart, or you should make sure to just write it down and make sure that it's whatever. This whole like writing for God thing that Benjamin talks about, where he's thinking of God as like what we're trying to get at with that word is like the universal good that is outside of any one person's full comprehension, right? But it's a way to triangulate with other people that says there's something we're both a part of. It's better than we are. We can only try to understand it. We can only do our best to speak in a way where we feel right with it. Like writing for God is like you're not writing for yourself. You're not writing for everybody, but you're trying to be humble, to get outside of yourself and to look at the situation. And I've been a pretty open agnostic for the last 10 years. But thinking about this writing for God thing and thinking about religion as performative, if not just pragmatic, but especially as performative as opposed to constitutive, J.L. Austin, How to Do Things with Words, thinking about it that way, got to the point where it's like now I'm thinking like I have not been writing for God in the sense that Benjamin is using the term in that episode we did called How to Not Write Like AI. And I've not been just like not writing for God. I also haven't been like thinking that way. I haven't been like, it's always been like me and Benjamin, me and Mikey, me and Nance, me and Aunt, me and me and me and me and then the only good is TU as a means towards a much bigger end that we never really get into in terms of vision, but it's it's the ultimate reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I indicated it when I really quit Theory Pleep and put the book Waypoint out. Like, there's a much bigger project here, and TU is supposed to like facilitate that. So that's the good, as far as I can tell. But of course, it's beyond my knowledge, and I can't overplan it, and I can only do what I think is right on the way there. Right? That's the good. Well, then there's also other means towards the end of TU, and then the extreme version being the 1,000 pounds that I shouldered to try to make this particular business plan for TU work. I think I get super instrumentalized and caught up in these immediate goals, and it's easy to lose sight of like the greater good that this is all supposed to be about. And so I tried this writing for God thing after Benjamin said that. And then when all of this stuff started happening, I really started, because, that episode happened the day that I found out Mikey was mad at me, right? And so, like, ever since then, I've been trying to write that way in the morning or in the evening. But it's hard, man. It's hard because, like, my ego will get involved and I'll start obsessing over details and, and it just made me realize, like, this is something I should be doing. But what I'm doing is basically praying. And I was like, I can't believe I'm praying because, like, I'm not a believer. So what's going on here? Why am I praying? I'm actually like trying to pray, and it's actually proving itself to be important, and it's like I should be doing this more. And that's developed actually to where it's like, I'm like, if I'm calling myself an agnostic, which is, I don't know, I really just genuinely do not know. Like when people, I mean, I can easily say, well, I'm an atheist about my parents' God, or I'm an atheist about this particular version of God. It's like easy to do that thing that the new atheists would do, where it's like, you know, it doesn't have to be the hard claim that there is no God. It's a lot easier to make the soft claim that your God is not real. But when you start doing that with people, you're saying you're not willing to work with them and their loyalty to what they think is right, and their attempt to get outside of themselves. And instead, these last 10 years especially, I've just been like a post-new atheist who's agnostic. But it's like, well, if I'm genuinely agnostic, then why am I not praying? It's been really interesting thinking about this. Like, why don't I pray? And it's because religion is cringe. It's because I have all these complicated feelings about a particular version of a particular religion that I think like messed my life up or whatever, right? That I blamed for all my problems. So all I'm saying is like that kind of thought about like, well, what about like writing for the good? What about writing in this way that tries to get outside of oneself and strives for the universal, that is not going to be totalizable by an individual particular? It's brought me to, I don't know, a new perspective, I think. And it's not like I've been to the top of Mount Sinai and now I've come down with the 10 Commandments and I know everybody, I know I'm glowing, I know what must be done. Listen to me now. Because that's not true. I don't know what must be done, but I do know that a lot more of that is needed. A lot more of that kind of solitude is needed. Not a solitude where it's me with my higher self, but instead a solitude where it's me with the idea of higher self beyond myself that also loves and cares about the others involved. And that's why it's performative, it's pragmatic, it doesn't have to be literal, but it's a real exercise. And so, I mean, I don't know what needs to be done, but I think that I do need to reflect. And this is not to say I'm taking a break. And it's not to say that Theory Underground is going to stop. But the emphasis of my research and the direction that it was already going for the last year has become a lot more clear. Because when I started Theory Underground, I was like, well, in 2020, I wish that X, Y, and Z kinds of courses had existed. I wish that XYZ books had existed. I wish that XYZ organic sort of like relations were possible, but instead none of that stuff was around when I needed it. And when I looked for it, I couldn't find it. And so I had to just do it myself, right? And I had this whole plan of like what kinds of courses, what kinds of questions were going to be driving the research of this school of thought, right? And it's like it's a 40 plus page document that sort of roadmapped the direction to go in. And when I look back at that now, I just go, yeah, I mean, I was onto something, but it's not exactly what's needed. It's not exactly what it's gonna be. Because the solutions are not just in theory, but also come down to like doing kinds of work that involves getting us outside of the niches of the post-class fractured mass. Not just to go do agoras publicly and live all the time, but also the stuff that we're doing with Sarutu, or SAA Rutu, Socioanalysis and Alien Anthropology Research Unit at Theory Underground, Surutu. That's a lot more what's become important, and phase one was basically like, you know, a kind of it's almost like sociological research, except that it's using some of the tools of deconstruction and field analysis or socioanalysis, which is why I've been talking about that recently on the channel. Surutu has become a lot more important. And this next phase of it is a way of taking myself to task and deconstructing the kinds of ideology that I have become a perverse comfort food that only makes me worse. You know, so we're talking ideology. Well, there's ideology all the way down. You can't get out of it. There's the explicit, the implicit, and the obscene, like, levels, and we can talk about that, and we have talked about that plenty on the channel. So that's not what's important. The point is like, there's chicken soup for the soul. And people need that. People need that. But those of us who've been hurt by those kinds of ideologies that are supposed to be feeding people chicken soup for the soul, one of the directions we can go is the bucket of ice water. Which is, I mean, if you're not thinking of Nick Land as the most extreme version, or Nietzsche as the most extreme version of this bucket of ice water kind of approach to ideology. Well, I mean, I get the term from Land, because in an interview, when people were talking about, we can't lose hope, we got to try something, right? We should be able to do something. And he's like, well, if you think that you're going to be able to do anything to overthrow capital, I just want to come along and put a big bucket of ice water on that. This is where you have the dangerous maybes that Nietzsche is talking about. Dangerous thoughts. I'm a dangerous kind of guy. I think dangerous thoughts. Versus, you know, what's obviously cope on the other side. But as you start thinking about cybernetics or dialectics or structural analysis, it becomes obvious that every ideology has a mixture of this chicken soup for the soul and the bucket of ice water. Let's take like a Baptist church. It's going to throw a bucket of ice water on your self-centeredness, on your narcissism, on your consumerism, on your me first. I know what's best. And it's going to say, you fucking don't actually. And then they're going to give you some chicken soup for the soul, which is like, humble yourself. Here's some grace. And you can be saved, right? Of course, there's like the epistemological gaslighting side of it, where they're saying, don't think about this deeply. You can't actually think about this deeply. You need to stop thinking critically. You just need to do what they call faith, which is crazy, and is a reaction to hyperbolic doubt, which is a reaction to a new kind of science and modernity and everything like that. But when you have something that becomes predominantly one way or the other, it's living in reaction to the other, all right? And so you can always think about like, well, what's the proportionality here of chicken soup for the soul versus bucket of ice water within any ideology? But then critical theory and philosophy can become, especially for isolated people on the internet, something where it's like, it's giving you a superiority complex because you think dangerous thoughts. So you're superior, you're a genius, you're better than everyone, right? If people could just see the world the way I do, then things would be better. Everyone should listen to me because I'm a genius, right? Like this is a negative tendency of this dynamic. Obviously one that I think a lot of people are susceptible to. I've obviously been very susceptible to this. But people also need their chicken soup for the soul, right? Zizek says, well, Marx said that opium is that religion is the opium of the masses, but nowadays opium is the opium of the masses, right? Like Zizek says that, and of course that's also true, you know. But religion hasn't gone away, and so it still works as an opium of the masses. Drugs still work as an opium of the masses, but also a kind of bucket of ice water approach to theory that means you don't have to take most other people seriously, or you can look down on other people. There's obviously going to be some kind of jouissance in that, right? Oh, did I leave out the U? There we go. There's jouissance in that. There's enjoyment. There's like that sort of intense enjoyment that's had at the expense of those friends or family members who are normies, who aren't into the things that you're into. And once you start thinking about it this way, it becomes obvious that philosophy and critical theory that tries to call into question the conditions of possibility of everybody else's world's views, while buying into grand narratives about what the fundamental problem actually is. Oh, it's all capital. Oh, it's all the state. It becomes like a way of disavowing the actual social relations, of disinvesting from social relations, from just burrowing down into a cocoon or under a rock like a hermit crab. And so you're working, you're listening to things on earbuds, you're becoming an enlightened autodidact, and you feel like you're a part of some kind of a community, but it's people who aren't able to show up and actually help you if things go south. So you're cut off from community. So I'm saying that the new direction Sarutu is going, Socioanalysis and Alien Anthropology Research Unit at Theory Underground, the direction that it's going in doing a kind of deconstructive research that undermines your own generalizable assumptions and forms of knowledge about other people and the world that you think you live in, and the ways that you think other people are, and the reasons you think that this intellectual stuff that you're doing is actually giving you some kind of authority or something like that. The direction Saruchi is going to go in is going to undermine all that, or at least try to, by saying in part, like, look, at the end of the day, you might be right about something, but still wrong. And other people might be wrong about something, but still right. And if we're going to think about churches, for instance, which is like one of the last places you'll find most people doing theory, if you want to think about churches, it's like, oh, they're all wrong. They're so deep in ideology. They're just over here with like chicken soup for the soul. Let's dump a bucket of ice water on their heads. Let's get our enjoyment from being better than that. Let's go do something else. It's like, that's crazy. It's crazy because people are hurting. People are without community. Me, for instance, I ran away from home as a teenager. I got into nonstop trouble with the law and with other people as a juvenile delinquent. Just working a series of dead-end jobs. I had like no future. And I found my community in the music scene. I found my community with a bunch of dropouts. I found my community with people at these dead-end jobs. And at some point I was like really on this, like, you pick your family, and I don't have to try to have relationships with my family. They're all so wrong. Their ideology is so messed up. For those reasons I was saying, epistemological gaslighting and social blackmail, which is so popular in those kind of Baptist authoritarian churches. But then what do you go? Where do you go from there? You go into the Unitarian Universalist church, like I tried, and it's just like this uber performative. We're not like those Baptists. We'll say Happy Easter, and then we'll also say, don't forget about our Muslim brothers and sisters. They're celebrating something today, and don't forget about our Jewish brothers and sisters. And they'll just keep talking about everyone who's not even in the room. And they're all, at the end of the day, like, well, most of them, from what I remember, like very granola, very urban monoculture granola types of people who think that they're better than my parents because they don't think about God in these stern father figure ways. And so they're so much better because they don't do epistemological gaslighting and social blackmail. They're so much better because they don't scapegoat. Of course, they scapegoat the Baptists, and they scapegoat the conservatives, and they scapegoat the, it's the we can't be tolerant of intolerance kind of idea from Marcuse, right? What I'm trying to say is, like, yeah, I was very put out by all of these institutions that are actually good at building community, because it's so easy to judge how they're just reacting to the other side of the political duopoly in this cultural moment. And it's like, that's not a way out. It's just a way into the niches. But the difference between me as a worker with earbuds and those kind of communities is that at least they had community. And so I went to college at my absolute wit's end. I saw no other options. To me, it was an extremely desperate move to start taking on debt, but I didn't have a will to live outside of, like, wanting to try to live an examined life. And I didn't see a future in the academy ever. Never, ever, ever have I ever seen a future there. But I wanted to delay the inevitable time that I just have to go back to work. And I thought I was finding community there too. A few times. But you can't find community with a slice of humanity where everybody's basically, like, within a certain age range going through a certain phase of their life. They're going to have another 5 to 20 phases in their life. And there's a high turnover rate for every student org. So there's professors, and they just see themselves as belonging to a certain kind of group that is in relation to a certain age range of the human population that never grows up. They'll never really be around those people when those people grow up. Those people might write them emails or get coffee with them at some point, but students are students, man, and they're going off in their own directions. And so, I thought I could find community there too. I also found community online, some kind of community, some kind of hyper-real community. And that's actually where I went after my final attempt to just do stuff, in real life with college people. Like, after that failed, I was like, well, I'll do stuff online. And Mikey was there through the worst of it. After things started falling apart with the second big thing that I tried to do with Brian, the guy who taught the Illich course, for people who remember. But yeah, Brian and we tried to do IRL stuff. And when that all fell apart and I was going through a big breakup and stuff like that, Mikey was a friend of mine from Facebook, and we talked a lot. And so he's seen the trajectory and growth and things like that. But one of the things we always come back to is how ultimately this is not a real community. This is a hyper-real community, which means that it feels better than a real community in a sort of short-term sense, but there's no real practical long-term feasibility in it. Because at the end of the day, when you need to call someone up just to help you because you're going through something, you can't, because though we're given like this simulacrum of people just being available on call, it's not true. They're not available on call. And we live our lives feeling like we're available to other people on call, but in a reality, we're not, because we are able to walk away from our phones and unplug. And so we're never really with each other, but we always also feel like we're with each other, but we also don't really know each other, and we don't actually know what it's going to be like when we actually do get together in the meet space. And then when we do, it's rarely what we thought it was, or if it feels like it is what it was or what we thought it would be, then it turns out it's just not the same, right? Like it's like dating someone long distance and then you finally get to meet, and then it's like either that's not going to go so well, you were getting catfished, motherfucker, or you're going to find out like, actually, no, it's great. But the thing is it's great, what, for a week? What about for months on end? What about for years on end, right? Is it still going to be great because you've not been in community? You don't share much of a culture outside of whatever it is you're doing on the internet. So yeah, I was going to do a whole lecture about phase 2 of Sarutu. I was going to do it last night. I was going to do it tonight. I was going to do it tomorrow night, whatever. I was going to do it as some pre-recorded thing with a couple of people like Benjamin or Matthew or Kier. Rebecca, they were all talking about how they would be there, and I'll do this like phase 2 of Sarutu thing, and then we would talk about it on Sunday as part of my seminar. I don't think I'm going to do it because I just need to focus on cleaning this house or this apartment, this shitty overpriced apartment. I have to clean it out today. And I also have a bunch of other stuff I have to go do today with students' finals. And the transition, though, it's like metaphorical, figurative, but it's also literal. Like I am actually in transition. I am actually moving. My very, very short stint, my 2-semester stint as a real adjunct professor at a university, that's coming to a close. This place that you've all seen me in now for quite a while is also coming to a close. And the big question is, what's next? And I want to be able to answer that without over-determining it. And I want to leave people who thought that they were trying to, who really thought that being in the comments regularly is being a part of a community. I really want to leave people like that with this bucket of ice water, that was something we said on channel plenty of times. Nance would say it, Mikey would say, this is not a community. Like, we can't actually provide a real community. I want to, dump that bucket of ice water on you and say, look, if you're hurt, if you're hurting, that's valid. It's definitely sucky. This shit is not ideal. Normally, you wouldn't have even known about it because Mikey and I have had plenty of fights, man, where we don't talk for a few months. But this is different. Like, this is qualitatively different. It's a different kind of situation. And it's one that, because now people know about it, I can't not talk about it because I know people are invested and people just have to deal with it in their own ways. And so I expect a lot of people might leave Theory Underground. And that's all right. And no hard feelings. If you want to sit this one out or go do your own thing, turn your phone off for a while, absolutely, all my blessings. I don't want people sticking around just because they feel bad or whatever. But the way that it's going with the plan, as far as what I'm going to be researching, I don't know. It's something I'll talk about in my seminar. At the level of practice, though, it literally, what I've been building up to is also saying, I'm going to church, which is crazy for me. But the first real application of this idea was Ann and I, instead of doing my seminar or a lecture one day, we decided, no, we'll actually be there for my parents because they're actually Like, this is a special day. It's Easter. There's no more important day for them than Easter, which, they call Resurrection Day. And my dad was in the choir. It's his favorite place to be. And, as he's been losing his hearing, he doesn't usually get involved with the choir because, he thinks that he's losing his ability to, like, sing the way he used to. It's like, well, I don't care if we disagree about how you understand the fundamental nature of reality or whatever. I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to go to that. And I'd already had like this idea of like, yeah, we should be going into churches even if we disagree with people because they at least know how to do community, and we shouldn't be ostracizing ourselves into the niches of the internet thinking we're so much better. And so, yeah, we went, and it was actually like a crazy sermon. I mean, I just genuinely think it was a crazy sermon. I'll be probably talking to Peter Rollins about this on channel in a couple weeks, because he and I have been talking about it. And it's, this is why he serves a community of people who are post-evangelical. He's telling people atheism for Lent. He's telling people that God has become an idol that people are worshiping, and they need to actually get outside of this idol worship to God and actually realize coming into a space of doubt and of lack and negation and contradiction is okay and is actually important for your faith. So he's been serving, people who are leaving these evangelical communities. And I was like, I don't think there's any way forward in this country if we can't, in some way, find a way of working with people who aren't going to leave, for people who are just gonna be in those communities. And so, like, I was telling him, this was a few weeks ago, I was telling him, no, I think as far as like organizing the left, going beyond right and left, creating educational kinds of spaces where people are able to work through contradictions, even if they don't agree. Something like Platypus, but more expansive beyond just different tendencies of the left, but actually like inclusive of people who might call themselves more conservative or just even not left, post-left, anti-left, whatever. Like, that's something that seems important, something that needs to be done just for educational purposes for people who are trying to work through things. Like, people need to be able to see those contradictions come to light in a kind of environment that fosters that kind of engagement, that kind of community, But it's easier said than done, and I've bent over backwards trying to make it happen, and in some ways I think it's succeeding, though we're still obviously way overrepresented here with like leftists, to where sometimes it just feels like Theory Underground is a bunch of leftists with a person who's like at the helm or in the driving chair being like, but I'm not, and everyone else is like, we know, Dave, keep driving. But it's not true, though. We have people who are straight up conservative. We have people who don't go to seminar because they're going to church, and then they try to catch up on the weekdays. We have people who were left who aren't left. So it's like they're there, but they're usually quieter, a bit more reserved. I think being a bit more reserved comes with the territory of being a bit more conservative. And then, that's been that part of the vision. But the other part of it is like being able to organize with people beyond how you think their ideas are bullshit or whatever. And beyond thinking yourself like, oh, I'm into theory, I'm so smart. And so, yeah, I'm trying to leave off on saying like socioanalysis and alien anthropology research or D-search at Theory Underground and the research unit that has been doing it, especially in the last year, has developed now for me to a point where I'm saying, like, it's not just go to gas station workers and truckers and students and faculty and be asking people questions to kind of deconstruct your own assumptions about the ways that people will be in the post-class fractured mass. The socioanalytic part is also like challenging the things that you think you desire, the things that you think that you are driven to because of psychological bullshit, and instead realizing that you have rationalized incentive structures from the fields that you've had to navigate, that you've been forced through fields, you've grown up through fields like the family, fields like the church, fields like the school, and that those all have their competing incentive structures. And those incentive structures include positions that can be taken up, such as like star student, star child, problem child, problem student. And then there's like these stereotypes that you can kind of like, you could take on that role and try to be an archetypical version of it. Or you can try real hard to do your own thing and not be any of that. But you're growing up in a schooling system or a school where you're surrounded by people who are holding certain positions that come with positives and negatives. And you're trying to figure out, well, what am I? And what am I doing? And especially in the schooling system that has separated you from intergenerational practical life and has instead confined you for a third of your life, for the most formative years of, for a third of the most formative years of your life, where you form like this competitive and super defensive identity complex or habitus. Maybe like you're like the really nice person who's not defensive, who's not competitive, but that's also in the context of a field that is supercharged with these dynamics. And so your habitus and how you rationalize it is something you bring into all theory with you. You bring it into all ideology critique with you. You bring it into any present that you could currently inhabit, and your future horizons are framed by the assumptions based in those habituses that are ultimately the result of you coping in non-ideal situations that are structurally stultified. I know this is a lot of theory jargon, but for a lot of people who've been involved at TU, you know what I'm saying. You've been following this whole thing with socioanalysis. And so that's an important part of this practice of sort of laying the groundwork for a whole new kind of approach to theory, or a whole new kind of approach to organizing, or a whole new approach to change that has at this point been yet left undiscovered, right? This work of clearing and laying a basis involves that kind of self work that doesn't just turn inward like psychoanalysis would, but instead has you really thinking about the relations of production, the mode of production, and how that stuff frames a horizon of possibilities, and how that horizon of possibilities that you're headed towards is also going to shape a lot of your habitus. And so it needs to be deconstructed. It needs to be worked through. And at the same time, like the PCFM thesis brings us to alien anthropology. You can't do sociology. You can't do a study of the social because there is no social. We're all just the other and surrounded by the other. There is no same, right? Except for like these superficial kinds of sameness or otherness. Alien anthropology, the way I'm using it, is getting at the fact that I am an alien to my next door neighbors. I'm an alien to the people across the street. They are aliens to me. And if they tell me what their favorite band is, or what their favorite parenting practices are, or what their favorite food is, none of that stuff is as important as trying to understand and, more importantly, just come to terms with that they are real, this is the way things are, and even if we're not always going to agree or get along, we're ultimately sharing this neighborhood. We're ultimately sharing this neck of the woods. And there's just, you got to be a realist about that, come to terms with it. And it's easier said than done. And so I'm saying, don't try to find your community here. Get out there. and try to actually meet people and do stuff. Apply these ideas, and go to a church where you maybe don't feel safe. Don't just go to a church where you think they're going to give you the chicken soup for the soul. Go to a place that will challenge you, and provoke you, and then also go to the other places as well, and you can deconstruct your own assumptions about the way that they're doing things, but you can also learn from some of the things that they're doing, and try to find the positives, because like that's not the tendency in theory. The tendency in theory is to always think about the negative, and I mean like in the sense of like what's wrong, but also there's a lot that they'll be doing right beyond the letter, beyond the epistemological gaslighting and social blackmail. But the question is, how do you go in there alone? How do you stand your own ground if they're going to try to tell you you have to believe this or that, and oh blah blah blah? And the answer is just like, well, you're an adult, right? You can hold your own ground, right? You can lovingly explain that, oh well, I'm just not so sure about that, and I'm not really convinced by that. But I'm open. I'm open. I think the way Benjamin was saying this to me, yeah, it's not trying to expose yourself. No, it's not trying to. Yeah, sorry. No, this was Daniel said this. Daniel said, you're not trying to expose them to the world. You're trying to expose yourself to them. You're not trying to form or influence them so much as see how they will form you. And doing a work of going beyond this sort of judgy, self-superior thing. Yeah, and so like, I mean, at least for the next couple of months, we're going to be doing a sort of rotation where it's like, Ann and I, we go to my parents' church, but we also go to that that Universalist Unitarian church. We also go to like a Roman Catholic church. We go to an Eastern Orthodox church. We go to a Mormon church. And the point is not to join. It's not to expose. It's not to judge. It's to see what they're doing that is working, and how we can help, and how we can be benefited by this loving community. And also learning that there are different fundamental dispositions or needs that different kinds of humans have for different kinds of support and different kinds of love. And just learning from that. And I closed out the thing I did with Doug Lane yesterday on this. I don't know when he'll publish it or whatever, but we're getting into it a little. What's the point of theory? Is it just so that you can be smarter than everyone else? That's kind of what we were talking about at the end of that. And I told him, well, there's also just theory as jujitsu, right? For Bourdieu, he talks about socioanalysis being like a martial art. And what does that mean? Well, it means that like you're going to have people telling you it is this way or it is that way, or they're competing with you in this way or that way. And you have to know how to defend yourself and stand your own ground. And so socioanalysis, as I've learned it from Bourdieu and how I've tried to integrate aspects of it into alien anthropology, but also the stuff that I've done organizing and the stuff with time energy theory and Marx, Heidegger, Levinas, Lacan, etc. I think it's right to like think of it as a martial art. And if you're in denial of it being a martial art, then that means that you actually might be using it in a way that's violent when you're not even aware that that it is. Because if you're learning a martial art and you're like becoming like superpowered, you can hurt yourself or other people if you're not realizing that it's a real practice that comes with real responsibilities, especially when dealing with normies. Like if you just start talking like a theorist around normies, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing that? Like, that is not a thing that we do, right? Like, and the theory underground's always been very against that kind of thing. And Doug said afterwards that, or maybe he said at the end of that, he says that that's something he might want to challenge me on, and that it's actually something that sounds kind of scary, thinking about this stuff is like jujitsu. And I said, yeah, we'll talk about that. And it is dangerous or whatever. But the reason I want to bring it back into what I'm talking about here before I close out is just to say, if you're going into spaces where they believe different than you do, yeah, well, you might find yourself unwelcome, or you might find yourself in a difficult conversation. So how do you deal with that? Well, the tools of ideology, critique, and theory can be used responsibly and in a non-arrogant or egotistical way. They can be. It might not be easy at first, but there is a way. And part of the work I think that I want to do on myself is to take myself to task and go into these kind of spaces with Anne and develop like ourselves. But also theory makes it so we really can stand our ground if we actually have to, right? So it's like, oh, you want to roll? Okay, yeah, I know how to roll, but I can roll in a way that's like not arrogant, that's not reverse gaslighting, that's not reverse social blackmailing, right? And so that's the direction I'm headed in. Who knows what will happen? Who knows what it will be like in 2 months, in 5 months, in a year? Who knows? I have no idea, and I'm not going to overthink it, because theory is just overthinking things if you're not just getting out there and actually doing it. And what little I've done so far in this this way has proven rewarding and super, super interesting. And it's fascinating work. And if you're doing it, you probably do need some niche group of people who are also doing it, who you can at least kind of like go to as almost like a theoretical support group, who's going to be like, so how's it going with those relationships that you're trying to build in these communities where people believe things that you don't believe? How's that going? Having a support group is something you can organize on your own. You don't need Theory Underground for it. But in terms of like Benjamin Studebaker, how he's thinking about like, we need a monastery. Well, the monastery is not the church. The monastery is a place where the people go and they have sort of closed door conversations about how they are going to work with the churches. And the schools are also churches. And the people who are disenfranchised public school teachers are behind enemy lines in a sort of sense. If the working class children are being formed in these super competitive and identity, what do I want to try to say? Defensive competitive identity formation kind of contexts. That's all coerced and carrots and sticks, and those teachers are being overworked and stretched thin and underpaid, and they're behind enemy lines in a sort of sense, and they need that kind of support group. And I think homeschool moms are the same way, and I know that because I grew up in one of these places where my mom was doing everything herself, and she didn't have support. And at the end of the day, instead of the teaching, most of what she was doing was a bunch of other stuff that she wouldn't have had to do as much if there was more of a community there. And she didn't really have like a community of people who were trying to do similar enough work. And so a lot of people, they start rushing forward like, how are we going to influence the next generation? How are we going to influence the next generation? How are we going to influence the next generation? One dime told me last night, because I did a couple interviews. Doug and Tony, they've been trying to do some shit with me, and we finally just got to it. And but Tony was telling me like, you're never going to get out of influencing people, Dave, and it's cap if you think that you're not trying to influence people. And it's true, Tony. The issue is about how we think about generations, how we think about time, how we think about giving ourselves the time to do the research that we need to do so that we can become the kinds of people who can actually have that kind of positive influence. Like, how much time are you giving yourself to do the work? Or are you just trying to cater to an actually existing audience, like the next generation, the kids, the Zoomers or whatever? And for me, it's like not about that. It's about a much longer term thing. And part of that, what I said in Waypoint back in 2020, is that I'm giving myself the time. I said I'm giving myself 5 years to prepare to write the book to the parents of the kids who will be 25 in 30 years. I'll write another book to those kids who are 25 in 30 years. But right now, I'm preparing myself to write a book to the people who are going to be deliberate or intentional parents to that generation. Not the Zoomers, not Gen Alpha, not the next generation, but no, a specific generation. And this, instead of focusing on that generation so much, it's about focusing on developing myself to actually have something worth saying to the people who are thinking very intentionally about the future, because they're bringing life into these crazy times. You know, as far as there's a revolutionary subject, that's mine. Homeschool moms, isolated public school teachers, renegade academics, workers with earbuds, but specifically ones who are trying to get out of their niches, get out of their bubbles, who are trying to stop just using theory as a form of jouissance had at the expense of the laity. These rogue priest class people who are autodidacts, who are just like me, thinking, oh yeah, I'm just doing it. I'm just doing me. We're just doing us. We don't care about them. And being like, instead of like trying to influence them, trying to be influenced by them, to just be a part of real communities, as flawed as they might be. At least they're real. So I can't say that much about the direction things are going in, because shit will change. But I hope what I've said here gives you some kind of direction and some kind of an idea of something that you can go do. That's not just this, especially if you want to lead. Just go do what you got to do. I'm giving you ideas about what you can go do. But yeah, this kind of like support group approach for the kinds of people I just listed off, that is kind of more the direction. Instead of it being so much about theory or it being so much about the underground, it's going to be a lot more about tending soil and cultivating souls and uplifting people who are dealing with trying to do things different with theory and practice. And so, yeah, I'll still be talking about this with I don't know, whoever on Sunday, and there'll still be like some stuff I'm doing. Nina's still doing what she's doing. Benjamin's still doing what he's doing. People can still take, like, it can still access Mikey's shit and all of that, but for now at least, the yeah, no, he's gone. Nancy's gone. It sucks. I'm tore up about it. I'm not going to talk about too much of the details, because I don't think that the details, whether it's what happened at LAC or what happened in that phone call or what happened, I don't think that those are the real issues here. I think that the times are changing, and we're all trying to cope with that, and we're realizing that the current plan, or the plan that I've been operating under, that was so stressful this whole year, it's just not. It's not going to be what we thought it was, and that's just what happens when you organize. And so I'll be thinking a lot more about this, and maybe I'll come back and say some more stuff about it later. But I also might not say anything about it ever again, and I give myself the right to ignore any discourse about it. I also am going to say that the only people that I want to talk to about it are going to be the people that I reach out to talk to about it. Unless, of course, for whatever reason, I decide to hold some kind of a space to talk about it. But I reserve the right to just not go any deeper. And I definitely don't want people asking me questions that will get me, that will provoke me to talk about it when I might be cycling through some hurt or when I might come off as angry or resentful. I definitely don't want that. And I would appreciate if people will also try to avoid anything that will cause that sort of a spiral in themselves or others. But this is coming down. Let's see. Will this work? Let's just sort of really drive home the point here. And I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it right now. If I can. No, wrong drill bit. I'm going to have to go find the right drill bit. So I'm going to go do that. I'm going to close out the stream. This has been great. Guys, I have to tear all of this down now and spend the rest of the day trying to clean. And so, love you guys. Appreciate the nice things that you wish you could have said in the comments for those who are here who are feeling ways about it. But yeah, with that said, thank you. It's been real.